with the first pick.
Thunderstruck! Thunderstruck! Yeah, Thunderstruck!
Welcome into the Fantasy Rant podcast presented by Stadium Rant. Check out Stadium Rant on YouTube. We got tons of great content on there, 4 podcasts rolling at all times, another 5th coming. So make sure you check it out. We are the Fantasy Rant podcast. I'm your host, Dan Baker. We got our co-hosts here, Mason, Lee, and Evan. Make sure you check us out on the YouTube for those socials. And we are going to be covering some values and busts today. Some fantasy players that we think, really might have a chance of popping off given their ADP. And then some guys that we don't think are going to live up to their average draft position. And then tomorrow we got real NFL football, boys. I mean, it's the preseason. What is NFL? Right. We're approaching it. But it's approaching sooner than you may think. Make sure you're staying tuned for future episodes too. We're going to have some more fun mock drafts coming your way. But let's kick it off with comparing Houston and Chicago. They're the teams that play tomorrow in the Hall of Fame game. And just looking at the team, they are so similarly constructed. They have a very young quarterback, first or second year in the league. They got a younger field stretching wide receiver. DJ Moore is not necessarily young anymore, but he's still athletic field stretcher, similar to Nico Collins. Stephon Diggs and Keenan Allen both brought into the Bears and Texans, as the savvy veteran wide receiver that's supposed to take this quarterback over the top. Probably more slot. We'll talk about that later, and then Tank Dell and Rome Odunze, again, first and second year players. Tank's got, 11 games in the NFL only. So those two can both do it all, even though Tank's kind of classified or thought of as a slot wide receiver. He does not run most of his routes there. Joe Mixon, DeAndre Swift, free agent running backs being brought in, and then Dalton Schultz and Cole Kmet, on the younger side. Very similar constructions here. So let's not waste any time. Let's dive right into it. Right now, let's start off with the quarterbacks. We got C.J. Stroud and Caleb Williams. C.J. Stroud, by Sleeper's ADP, when I checked this afternoon, 410 off the board, whereas Caleb Williams is the 811. So back of the 8th round compared to back of the 4th round. For C.J. Stroud, that is QB5 compared to Caleb Williams at QB11. Any of you have a strong take on which way you would lean given the ADP?
I mean, I'm not taking Caleb Williams. You said as the QB11?
QB11.
Just,
and back of the 8th.
Being a rookie, there's a lot of risk there. And, back of the 8th, there's a lot more positions you can get. I believe T-Law has fallen to like the 10th in a lot of leagues, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that just, drafting Caleb Williams, a rookie, I mean, he could have a great year, honestly. He's got a great team around him. But there's guys like T-Law that are coming later that I think it's a lot safer of a pick.
I want to bring that up later. I want to hear your guys' takes, but I do eventually want to hear Caleb Williams versus T-Law and redraft this season. But who's got a strong take for C.J. Stroud versus Caleb Williams?
I would go. Go ahead, Em.
I was gonna say, let's look at what C.J. Stroud did last year. If Caleb Williams goes out and puts that up this year, how would we think about him? We'd be like, yeah, this guy's got it, But C.J. Stroud already has it. So, given that, how far away are they drafted again? What's their draft difference?
That's why it's interesting. C.J. Stroud's being taken with the 10th pick of the 4th round, where Caleb Williams is the 11th pick of the 8th round. So it's a full 4 rounds later.
Yeah, I would still take C.J. Stroud for the security here. I thought it was a little bit four whole rounds later. That's 4 whole
rounds. So, just to give some players going off within that vicinity, right after C.J. Stroud, we got Trey McBride, Zay Flowers, Tank Dell, Mark Andrews, Anthony Richardson, Amari Cooper. Just generally speaking, and for the 8-11, let's see here. we got players like right after 8-11 is Jalen Warren, Austin Eckler, Keon Coleman, Brock Purdy, Christian Watson, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. So obviously the opportunity cost is you're able to go and grab another stud in the 4th round, back to the 4th there instead of CJ Stroud. And then, I mean, one quarterback name just came up that's going after Caleb Williams. That is my favorite target in Brock Purdy. Jaden Daniels is amazing. He's an incredible late round target, but I can take Brock Purdy confidently without drafting a second quarterback. If I take Jaden Daniels, I will draft another quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, who is going very late in drafts right now.
Yeah.
So that's what I was just gonna interject. You know, if I'm choosing between CJ Stroud and Caleb Williams, I'm choosing Jaden Daniels. And listen, I'm gonna get to those two guys, but if we all know that rushing, you know, is a cheat code for quarterbacks. It doesn't matter really, even if it's 6-point passing touchdowns. We know that rushing is the cheat code. The value of where you're able to get Jaden in that 10 to 11th round range. I mean, to me, I really don't want to build, especially in redraft, but in Dynasty as well. I don't want to build around a guy who gives you 0. And maybe Caleb Williams does give you a little bit with his feet. We'll see. But he wasn't really that guy in college. He would scramble for his life, and then he would throw the ball. You know, he could buy a ton of time with his legs. CJ didn't show us very much with his legs. There's a lot of weapons there. If I have to choose, I would certainly choose. And it's a little bit – CJ's just too high for me to draft. But if I'm choosing between him and Caleb Williams, I'm choosing CJ Stroud because we've seen him do it in the NFL, and the weapons are very, very comparable. But I would pass on them both, honestly, at where they're going.
I think we're all kind of saying a similar thing in a different way. Because of where CJ Stroud's going, and he has even less rushing ability than Caleb Williams, I'm almost completely out on CJ Stroud, unless he drops significantly from this ADP we're talking about right now. There's 0 chance I'm drafting CJ Stroud in the top 5 rounds. So you'd have to make it to the 6th in order for me to consider him. But right now, we got Joe Burrow with the average draft position of 603. Kyler Murray, 701. Dak Prescott, 702. All 3 of those guys, I think, have a higher likelihood of finishing above CJ Stroud. It's been 1 year. Incredibly impressive. Got additional weapons now. I think he will have success. However, I don't think it's going to be that, just absolutely carry your fantasy team. I think he's going to be great for the NFL, and I think he'll be solid for fantasy. But without that rushing upside, there's quarterbacks I like later. And I'd rather take Caleb Williams and try to match him with, you know, a safer floor guy like Jared Goff or maybe, you know, even like a Matthew Stafford late, like last pick of the draft. So that's where I'm at. But it's purely ADP based. I'd just rather go and get a wide receiver or running back in the 4th.
Yeah, what do you guys think the odds are that Caleb does put up a season equivalent to the amount of fantasy points that CJ Stroud put up?
I would say 30 to 40%, right in that range. I don't think it's out of this world.
I'd be
real life NFL, is he going to be as good? No, I don't think in his first year, but interceptions aren't bad for fantasy. Obviously, it takes 2 points off the board, puts your team in a position where they have to pass more. So I think that would be his biggest downfall, is that maybe he takes some shots and turns the ball over a few times. But with that wide receiver core, pass catching running back, 2 athletic tight ends, he's got it set. He's got a little bit more legs than CJ. So
it's not an unachievable target either. I mean, he's QB 11. So CJ Stroud was last year. So
right.
I think that is pretty achievable for him, actually.
Did you change your opinion? Are you on? Would you take Caleb over CJ now?
I mean, yeah, probably. Yeah, I mean, pretty much I didn't realize CJ was going that high, to be honest. I did not.
410. Yeah, that's in sleeper specifically. It's the fantasy footballers on their website, they average sleeper, ESPN, Yahoo, and Underdog. Them averaged together, CJ Stroud is 505. doesn't change dramatically. Caleb Williams does drop about a round in 3 picks. He's at the 10:01 there. It's pretty late if you're averaging all 4 leagues together.
Yeah, I mean, honestly though, to touch off of Caleb Williams putting up C.J. Stroud numbers last year, I think he easily could do it. I don't think it is going to happen, but you can't count it out completely. He is a very lethal deep threat of a quarterback. He's got DJ Moore there, who'll obviously help out there a lot. I mean, just the weapons around him will definitely give him that chance to put up those numbers. And I mean, like I said, C.J. Stroud barely ran the ball at all, and if he did, it was usually just for short pickups. Say Caleb Williams just adds on 200-300 rushing yards. That alone could help him, boost a lot higher towards those numbers if he puts up, let's say, 3,500 passing yards.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's move on to our next. Hold on. We all came to the consensus. Me and Evan were Caleb. You two were CJ, right? For the most part.
I mean, I wouldn't really draft either of them at the capital.
That's the thing. We're forced into this decision.
Yeah,
I'm not really gunning for either of these guys. But I digress. We'll move on to the next players here. We got Nico Collins and DJ Moore. Both are, downfield targets, players that are going to be very efficient with their touches. Last year, Nico Collins, 109 targets, caught 80 of those for 1,297 yards and 8 touchdowns. DJ Moore, kind of similar numbers, a little bit better there. He was caught 96 of his 136 targets for 1,364 yards and 8 touchdowns. Collins was wide receiver 9, where DJ Moore was wide receiver 6. Now this year, though, Nico's make the big jump. He's going to be drafted as the wide receiver 14 in the middle of the 3rd round at the 305. DJ Moore also in the 3rd round, but back at the 3rd, he's drafted at the 311 as the wide receiver 19. It also speaks to how many wide receivers are going in the first few rounds here. Definitely locked and loaded, front-heavy wide receiver class. But let's see here. Evan, you got a take between the two. Who do you like more, Nico or DJ Moore? And really quick, guys out there, let me just tell you, he's got Nico on his dynasty roster.
I do.
So you know where this is going.
I do, and I will be following in my footsteps as traditional, because I will be taking Nico here all day long. I mean, both of them are in kind of similar situations where both the offseason they got weapons added to the offense, and it's kind of throwing a question mark on how the targets are going to be dispersed. The only thing is, I think the difference between the additions is much more significant for what happened to DJ Moore as opposed to Nico Collins. Nico Collins also has Tank Dell coming back from an injury. He only had one player really come in, Stephon Diggs, big name player, come in for competition. If you look at DJ Moore, he's got Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze now added to the target mix, and that throws like a much bigger question mark on there for me. So I actually almost thought about putting him in our next segment here, but I refrained because it is still a question mark for me. So not too confident.
Very interesting.
So
Lee?
I would go the other way. Shocker. The disagreement there is Nico Collins had his best games when Tank Dell was not on the field. So I think with Tank coming back, if we can assume health, I think the situations are very, very similar. And DJ Moore has proven he has a track record that he is a top-end wide receiver. We've only seen one season from Nico Collins. Obviously, if it's dynasty, it's a different conversation, and I would lean towards youth, especially with Nico just getting a new contract. But for one season in redraft, I feel much more confident that DJ Moore is going to be the wide receiver 1 versus Nico
DJ
Collins.
Moore did get a new contract too, though. Got extended.
Yeah,
it's just those extra few years do matter. Like I said, as far as dynasty goes, just in age.
Right.
And Rome just got added, and Diggs is on a 1-year contract.
Sure, but Keenan Allen's 134 years old, and it's cold weather. We've talked about that. Cold weather.
He's also on a 1 year. They also voided his years after this, so also a 1-year deal. Rome and Tank not that too far removed. Like Rome will probably have 5 years being a first rounder, whereas Tank will have 3 years left being second rounder. I get what you're saying though. he is the younger player and has a more direct route to being the wide receiver one on this team. I do think, as much as I love Rome Odunze, right now he's a rookie. Tank Dell already showed he can do the damn thing, and when they were on the field together, it was mostly one or the other. We got some write-ups coming out that we all have worked on here. I handled most of the wide receivers. At least you're honestly. At least you're honest. We worked on these. I did most of the wide receivers, and that was one of the big things I pulled away from this. However, DJ Moore is no shining star for consistency either. Probably not the right wording there, but DJ Moore had 3 explosive games last year, including one for 3 touchdowns,
We're not
200
talking
yards.
about no, we're not talking about that game. We're erasing that game.
It came against you, huh?
Thursday Night Football. That was fun. A lot of fun.
Oh, was it
Yep.
against Washington? Oh, I thought it was screwed your fantasy team or something. Yeah,
Screwed
no,
my life.
Washington, dude. I hope for your sake and your mental health they fixed up that secondary at least a little bit. I know that he made some investments in free agency, but I digress. Mason, take it away, my dude, Nico or DJ Moore.
I would more lean towards DJ Moore, that draft spot. Nico Collins, I mean, I don't think he's going to have a bad year by any means, but just in the middle of the third, there's a lot of inconsistency that just, or a lot of worries. I mean, with Diggs and Tank Dell, like you said, Tank Dell was feeding before he got injured, and then Nico only exploded after that, and there wasn't really any other competition. I mean, who else was really there? Noah Brown?
Dalton Schultz.
Yeah,
Right.
Dalton Schultz,
I mean,
yeah.
he even popped off in his opportunity, but yeah, I feel you. Not a lot of competition after that.
And now that there's 2 more wide receivers going to be added, I mean, Tank could take a little bit to really be back to 100%. But, I mean, Diggs could easily be the wide receiver one there. He's shown his talent year after year. And, yeah, last year he did struggle a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised at all of that. And also, the Texans brought in Joe Mixon. They did not have really any running back support last year whatsoever. I mean, it was Singletary. Yeah, it was Singletary, right? Yeah,
Singletary
Joe Mixon
did
is way
work
better
on
than
it. Yeah.
Joe Mixon is way better than Singletary, and I mean, when you look at that, it would be no surprise to see them run the ball a little more than they did last year. And it just, I mean, for the middle of the third, it's a risky pick. I mean, so is Diggs. Diggs is only a couple behind him in ADP. I think both of those, in the third round, if you miss big time in one of your first 3 picks, you're probably not going to win. And so I'm not confident in that. And then DJ Moore, like I was saying, he's a deep threat. Caleb Williams in college was elite at the deep level. And I think that can just transition to where even if DJ Moore's not getting as much catches because of, Keenan Allen, Odunze being added, and even DeAndre Swift will take some catches. I just think that the deep threat, the combination of his talent and Caleb Williams, their skill set, will lead to, big plays pretty frequently.
Yeah. Yeah, you were talking a little bit about Diggs there. That's a great transition, as the next players we're talking about is Stephon Diggs and Keenan Allen, 2 vets joining a new team. Diggs for his second new team, and Keenan Allen first time joining a new squad here. Keenan Allen only played 13 games last year. Despite that, was still the wide receiver 8, which was 2 spots ahead of Diggs despite the missed games. Right now, though, Keenan Allen is being drafted as the back of the 5th round, 512, and the wide receiver 30. Stephon Diggs is going at 309, so actually ahead of DJ Moore even, and the wide receiver 19 overall. I'm sorry, wide receiver 18 overall. So I think it's interesting that DJ Moore is being drafted just behind Stephon Diggs. There's no chance that I would take Diggs over Moore. Despite, I do agree with you, Mason. There is a world where Diggs finishes as the top guy on this team. I think that if any of these players, though, are to be just put into the slot and that is their role, I do think it's Diggs. Tank, like I said, he actually plays a surprisingly majority of his routes run are coming from the outside. So He had success there last year. Nico Collins is obviously not going to be the slot guy. I like Diggs to fall into that role, technical route runner. He does do well against the press, generally speaking. However, he has come down significantly in the past few years. I'm going to get that pulled up right now as I talk about Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is also in a similar position where I think he is primarily the slot guy here. Romo Dunze didn't play much slot at Washington, where he came out of, and DJ Moore, he can mix into the slot, but that is not his forte. Keenan Allen has always been a guy who can succeed in the slot. We just got to make sure that there's enough 3 wide receiver sets going on for Keenan Allen to stay on the field. Because if the Bears end up being, because they got a solid defense. If they have a great defense, don't have to pass the ball much, are in 12 personnel and not bring in their 3rd wide receiver on the field, I could see Keenan Allen having a little bit lower of a snap percentage than DJ Moore. He's still going to be above Romo Dunze for now, but later into the season, when you're actually trying to win your championship, that could be when Keenan Allen starts losing ground to Romo Dunze. So personally, I'm going Diggs over Keenan Allen, but I think it's ridiculous that Diggs is being drafted ahead of DJ Moore.
Yeah, so I would just add then, and then just before I get into the Moore versus Diggs, something you said there and what you finished with, that I would agree. I think it's pretty crazy that he's going in front of DJ Moore. And I think it's very important. As we're entering draft season, I'm going to assume that everybody's watching and listening pretty serious about fantasy. You're not just in an office league, not paying attention. So you want to win. The ADP game can be very dangerous. If you're going straight by ADP, it's very easy to look at that board and you need to pick between the top 2 or 3 guys, or you just feel like you're, especially early on. So I think as you go into draft season, you go into your home league drafts and your important drafts, it's super important to make your own list. Rank your own players, have that there, whether it's on an iPad, on your phone, have a resource that is your thoughts, your feelings outside of ADP. Now, it's always a good outline, but it's very easy to get caught up in the ADP game and end up taking, a player over someone that you rank higher because you're just going by the ADP on the board. With that said, I think Diggs would be my choice as well. I've already said, Allen, he's a great wide receiver, an all-time great wide receiver. He was phenomenal with the Chargers for many years. The injury history, we know he got banged up some. It's probably a little bit more exaggerated in our minds. I think you said 13 games last season. Every receiver is going to hit that age cliff, and I'm worried about that with the Bears. And I'm more confident, as we just said previously, I'm more confident in DJ Moore than I am Nico Collins. So that kind of correlates. To me, Diggs was phenomenal last year until Joe Brady came along and the entire offensive philosophy changed. We don't know what happened in the locker room. We know that they shipped him out, got rid of him for nothing. They were addition by subtraction. They just wanted to get rid of Diggs. You have to feel like that split happened sometime mid-season last year. He's always been a diva wide receiver. He's going to talk on the sidelines. So I do, I could see some trouble in Houston. But I do think we're in for a honeymoon phase in the first year. And if he gets anywhere near the target volume, the utilization he was getting in Buffalo, and obviously it's not going to be the same because there's a lot more mouths to feed. If he gets anywhere close, we saw he still finished wide receiver 10, and he did nothing in the last 6-7 weeks of the season. I mean, he killed you if you were still starting. Yeah. But some of that was the change of philosophy, and obviously there was a rift. I think it's pretty obvious there was a rift with Josh Allen.
Evan, I saw your comment. I do wish we had some.
I need a mini violin in a minute, so just I'll let Lee finish his take and let's see.
Violin going over the last 8 weeks of Stephon Diggs' season last year. Just like a meme of Joe Brady walking in, and then the sad music along with it, or the Titanic sinking. Any of it, because it all fit.
the violin wasn't for Diggs though. The violin was for how I'm currently feeling and how I hope I don't continue to feel as the season progresses. Because
A very
I hope
specific
you're all right.
violin.
I hope you guys are right. I hope you guys are right with Diggs being better significantly. Like I forget, none of you guys talked about Keaton being good, but I watched a highlight of Keenan connecting with Caleb on like a tiptoe touchdown, and he was wearing his ugly Bears uniform and all, and got up all happy. And I think
Wait, hold on. Why are you hating on the Bears uniform? Was it orange?
No, it was just blue.
Dude, the blues are classic.
Dark blue,
I
the
don't like
navy. It wasn't the powder blue that I was used to seeing. And then
There's literally one team with powder blues.
it was just it was a terrible sight to see, and I hope that I don't continue to see Keenan Allen connect with tiptoe touchdowns in the end zone with Caleb Williams, as I've already started to see. So, but you guys are selling him short. I think that there's a significant chance he even could outproduce him this year. The drastic difference in ADPs is not kind of reflecting that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just 2 rounds later there. I don't feel like there is as drastic of a difference.
I think so. Look where they were drafted together. They were drafted pretty close last year.
Yeah, I mean, either way, it's another set of players where really the upside's capped. They're older. They're not going to be the guy that takes a 10-yard dump off for another 20, 30 yards. They're not that player anymore. So they make their heyday on separation. I will say Stephon Diggs has lowered in that mark from his insane reception perception numbers for the past 5 or 6 years in a row. 4 or 5 years in a row. But yeah, 76th percentile versus man, 67th versus zone, and 75th percentile against press in terms of his success rate. That's kind of average where he used to be elite. Keenan Allen's still getting the job done. I do think that he'll operate better out of the slot only role. But that being said, rookie quarterback, I don't know. We'll see where it goes. I do slightly lean Diggs with the possibility of him being the one. Let's move on to Tank Dell and Rome Odunze.
You're gonna skip me.
Oh,
That's cool.
Oh, you didn't say anything? Go for it.
No, yeah, but
I thought you talked Diggs already.
No, I was because I mentioned Diggs when we were talking about TJ.
Oh, that's right.
But I'm gonna be the odd one and say Keenan Allen.
Yeah, Keenan,
Yeah.
let's go.
I mean, look, he's getting drafted as wide receiver 30. I don't see a world where he finishes that low or lower than that. I do not see him finishing worse than wide receiver 30. Yeah, it's a rookie quarterback. There is a lot of competition for targets, especially once Odunze starts to really step into that NFL readiness. But he was wide receiver 8, and he only played 13 games. I mean, to produce that amount of numbers, and yeah, he's older, but he's obviously still got it in him if he's able to do that with missing 4 games, which is I really don't see a world where he finishes worse than wide receiver 30. And I mean, Diggs, I could very well see him finishing worse than wide receiver 19. Do I think it's gonna happen? Maybe not, but I think there's more there's a more chance that will happen. And I think Keenan Allen he's still gonna have a great floor. He might not have the ceiling he once had, but he still should have a great floor. I mean, I don't see him doing worse than that.
Okay. So for our next guy up, though, we are going to move on to Tank Dell. He's got 11 games played last season, had 75 targets, 47 receptions, 709 receiving yards, and 7 receiving touchdowns. He ended up finishing as the wide receiver 38. This year he's being drafted as the wide receiver 26 and is going in the mid-5th round at 505. Rome Odunze on Sleeper specifically is going at the 608. That's the wide receiver 33 right now. But I will say he's going a little bit later in other leagues. Right now, Rome Odunze is going. Where is he? Yes, I do think that is the case, like, especially with it being I feel like one of the primary platforms for Dynasty and, off season. I do think that so Rome Odunze going at the 10:02 average draft position in ESPN, 709 in Yahoo, kind of split in the difference, and then 608 in Sleeper, giving him a average of 710. Um, if we're just basing it off Sleeper ranking right now, so Tank Dell 505, Rome Odunze 608. For me, it's an easy answer. It's Tank Dell. Tank Dell truly has the opportunity to still finish as the wide receiver 1 on this team. I think because he can do it all, he is. I don't think will be limited to the slot position, and showed that he can put up just as much, if not more, fantasy points than Nico Collins when both were on the field. He consistently finished higher than they flip flopped a lot of the times when one had a great game, the other one did not. But Tank Dell was more consistent, had more great games when both were on the field.
Yeah, I'm also going to side with you. I think I'd go Dell there. I think Odunze it's going to take too long for him to necessarily, really get going. Between him being a rookie, there being a lot of competition, Caleb Williams being a rookie. I think that Odunze, honestly, maybe 5 or 6 weeks, if he doesn't have a major blow-up game yet at that point, he might find himself on waiver wires. I think they'd rather draft some other players around that range instead of, a guy that you might be able to pick up. That might not be the case, but I don't see Odunze necessarily blowing up right away just with all that. And then, Tank Dell, getting him this late for a guy who could be the wide receiver 1, like you were saying, I think that's the higher play there. Tank Dell, I don't see him finishing outside of, top 36, I'd say. I don't see that happening, and I think that's a lot of safe. Odunze could finish outside of top. He's drafted a lot later, obviously, but I think I'd rather just, spend the early pick on Tank Dell and, potential winning numbers for you there from a guy you're getting in, the 5th or 6th round, the 5th round. I think there's a lot more potential there.
Okay. Lee?
So I know we've got at least 1 or 2 board bets, and I'm probably the highest on Rome Odunze. I like Tank Dell. I would go Rome Odunze here, and I think if we're drafting him at the exact same spot, obviously, because Tank has shown us some of what he can do, I probably have to, but I would do it begrudgingly. And this isn't fair, but we live in the real world. The NFL is a physical game. They are some of the best athletes that this country produces. Tank Dell is 5'10", 165 pounds. Rome Odunze is 6'3", 216 pounds. That frame is built much more to be able to withstand a 17-game season. Tank was incredible when he was on the field. There is no questioning that. Can he last a 17-game season with that frame and that body and the workload that he's going to need to really be able to produce at a high level the way he did last year? To me, he has to be his volume needs to be reduced. You bring in Stephon Diggs for a reason. And again, we flip-flop because Nico missed a few games, and that was some of Tank's highest volume games. So maybe in a world where that volume can be split up more evenly between the three, he can be more healthy and last longer. He's a great route runner. He's a professional wide receiver. We've seen that. Both guys drafted in the same class with their wide receiver. That was one of my biggest things for Rome Odunze. History says that the wide receiver that comes into rookie camp with a high-end rookie quarterback generally becomes his favorite target. So I could see both of them becoming the wide receiver 1s in short order. I do like DJ Moore more than Nico and Stephon Diggs. So it's a little bit of more of a stretch for the Bears. But I think there's a much higher likelihood that Rome Odunze plays 17 games. And while the first 5 weeks of the season, you're going to want Tank Dell. In the playoffs, leading into the fantasy playoffs, Rome Odunze is going to be the guy you want. Keenan Allen's 32 years old. I just feel a major drop-off coming for him. And even if you're the wide receiver 2, I still think this is going to be a pretty pass-heavy Bears offense. we know that the Houston offense was very pass heavy last year. A lot of that was offensive line injuries. It's the San Francisco offense that they're trying to run. They want to run the ball. I don't know how much Joe Mixon is going to be able to give them, but if that O-line is healthier, they are not going to throw the ball as much as they did last year. I do look for Chicago. I don't see DeAndre Swift getting a ton of carries. It's going to be split with him and Roshan Johnson. I like Rome Odunze to be the number 2 option in that offense pretty early on, and he's really going to get a lot of that underneath stuff, especially if Keenan Allen does lose a step.
Okay, so we need to wrap up this segment here. So I'm going to just do a quick hitter for the other 2 positions we're going to talk about. Joe Mixon is currently the 411 in RB15. DeAndre Swift is the 607 in RB21. I will personally take Joe Mixon over DeAndre Swift. Where do you guys stand on that?
I'd take Swift.
I'd say Swift. Swift only finished lower than he did. I mean, similar, rushing stats to Joe Mixon. He actually did a little better, but a lot of goal line touchdowns were taken away due to Philly running the tush push. So I could just see a lot more touchdowns going Swift's way this year.
I don't love either. I mean,
Right.
these are guys that I'm passing on. Honestly, I don't want either one of these guys on my team. I will take
any of these players on any of these teams, to be honest.
I will take a shot on Tank Dell, given that he is the latest Texan wide receiver and who I have projected to lead the Texans in fantasy points. It's neck and neck between him and Stephon Diggs, but I just think that if he can finish out the season, I think that he will end up being the most consistent across the board. I'll take Mixon, touchdown upside. I don't know if they really lean on DeAndre Swift around the red zone. And I agree with you, Lee. Roshan is going to be a factor. Khalil Herbert, you know what? I might be wrong with the last season. I don't know. But his first 3 seasons in the NFL, he averaged over 5 yards per carry. Might have gone down just a hair underneath 5, but still an impressive mark. He's been an efficient runner when healthy. Joe Mixon just has an inefficient Dameon Pierce to compete against. Not worried about that. And also, Caleb Williams doesn't have the play style where he's going to be checking down. He's going to try to extend. I think he's going to take a bunch of sacks. CJ Stroud, incredible against the blitz. Think he'll check down more. Dalton Schultz versus Cole Kmet. Similar ADPs with Dalton Schultz going at 10:05. He is the tight end 14. Cole Kmet is the very next tight end at tight end 15, going at the 11:09. I personally will take Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, so
just a little bit more pass happy of an offense and a guy I can rely on. Although I do like the wide receivers just a touch more in Houston.
I'll take Kmet just because he's younger. The ceiling is higher. He really did well in the red zone last year. Hopefully he can replicate that. So that's neither. These are both you've punted on the tight end position, and you're probably going to be streaming. So looking for matchups. But I think we've seen Schultz ceiling. We maybe haven't seen Cole Kmet ceiling yet.
Cole Kmet is more athletic. I'll definitely give you that for sure. Yeah, and like you were saying, 13 red zone targets, caught 10 of them for 5 touchdowns. That's pretty solid. The 13 targets was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7th. Fantasy Pros, please give me the numbers how they are. Don't just give me whatever you think the ranking should be. And then when I change it, it's just jumbled numbers. Almost hit that word early before our radio broadcast ends. But all right, let's move on to Mason, what's up? Who you got?
I would say Kmet, because like Lee was saying, taking tight end at this point, you are likely streaming.
Right.
I think Schultz does have a better floor. I think he's going to be more consistent, but I think Kmet's going to have some weeks that, are what you're really wanting from a streaming tight end. If it's the right matchup against a team that struggles against tight ends, I think, Kmet could really have some good weeks. I do think Kmet has a lot higher of a ceiling, and that's where I'd go this late if you're going tight end this late.
Since we're bringing up streaming too, the two teams don't have a significantly better start to the season in terms of the strength of schedule. And obviously, it'll change position by position. But just to cap it off, this is something you guys are going to need to start thinking about there, especially for your later round picks. If you think it's a guy that is just going to be streaming for your team that you just want to take a shot on, make sure they have a good opening schedule. The Bears start off with the Titans, the Texans, so they will replay this Hall of Fame game in week 2. Indianapolis Colts, and then the Rams. So that was the Bears. Again, Bears played Tennessee, Houston, Indy, and the Rams. The Texans go up against Indianapolis, Chicago, Minnesota, and Jacksonville to start off. Of the two, I would say Houston's got the easier opening schedule. Let's move on to our next one, though. We have our next segment. We are going to be talking about some values and busts. We're going to start off with the busts because they're just a little bit more interesting here. And of the most interesting bust picks, hey, got his attention. CMC Lee, talk about it. What's happening here, man?
So there's a few things, and again, I'm not saying if you get the first pick in your draft and your redraft, I'm looking to trade it. If your league allows trades, I'm trying to trade it. I think there's more value a little bit further back, but there's a couple of reasons why I do think CMC is going to disappoint this year. The first one I'll point to is he had 335 touches last year between his receptions and carries. The last time he had that kind of usage was 2019, and he was also running back 1 that year. The following year, it showed because he was hurt for the majority of the year and finished at running back 53 in PPR. He's 28 years old. That is a enormous workload for any running back in the NFL, much less somebody that's 28 years old. I believe that San Francisco, as Brock Purdy, Mason, enters his 3rd year and gains more trust in that offense. They were the most efficient passing offense in the league, and they threw it maybe the least amount, or I know they were at the bottom of the league in their passing attempts, but the efficiency was incredible. Especially if Brandon Ayuk is back. We've drafted a first round wide receiver. We have weapons. I do see this becoming more of Brock Purdy's offense instead of Christian McCaffrey's. And I think that's by necessity because you cannot lean on a 28-year-old running back. If you expect that amount of touches, he is going to get hurt. He is going to miss time. But the other thing, and just historically speaking, and I'm not going to go back too far. Over the last 5 seasons, I want to talk about the consensus number 1 pick in every fantasy draft. So all the way back to 2019, our consensus was Saquon Barkley. He was coming off an incredible rookie year. He only played 13 games in 2019, and he finished as running back 10. That's going to be the high watermark of the guys I speak about right here. And running back 10, while it is certainly serviceable, it is not a bad finish. For your number 101, the very first pick in the draft, that is a discipline. In 2020, coming off of the year I was just talking about, Christian McCaffrey was the consensus number 1 pick. He finished as RB 53, and he played 3 games. In 2021, Christian McCaffrey, because everybody believed he was coming back, and I may have mixed this up. He played 10 games.
You're right, but it's just like you can't hold the injury against him. He's running back in the NFL.
Just wait for it. So in 2021, everybody, they forgave him. He missed a few games. He's still the consensus number 1 pick. He played 7 games that year. He finished as RB 38. In 2022, Jonathan Taylor, coming off an incredible season for the Colts, was our consensus number 1 pick. He played 11 games, and he finished as RB 33. Last year, Justin Jefferson was our consensus number 1 pick.
Oh, shit.
He played 10 games, and he was wide receiver 33. So over the last 5 years, every person that has been the consensus number 1 pick has missed significant time and have failed to live up to expectations.
So you're telling me I got a chance.
I'm telling you that history says the consensus number 1 pick in fantasy football does not meet expectations. And if you combine that with a running back that is 28 years old with an ascending quarterback and a good backup, is Elijah Mitchell going to get more work? Because if you want him as fresh as possible in the playoffs, you want to win the Super Bowl, which obviously San Francisco does, you save as much juice in those tires as you can to the playoffs. You do not want a repeat of 2020, 2021 with Christian McCaffrey. So if they give him the workload that you're going to need to justify 101, Mason, he is going to be out of gas in the playoffs, and you are once again going to choke in the playoffs and not win a Super Bowl. If McCaffrey gets a lighter workload, they throw the ball more, they work in Elijah Mitchell, and you have a fresher Christian McCaffrey in the real NFL playoffs, which I know you care about more than the fantasy, Mason. That is your best chance to win a Super Bowl. Kyle Shanahan is not a stupid person. That is without projecting injury. I'm just saying, because you can never project it, even though the history, I just went over the last 5 years. It's happened every year. But even without that, I see a lower finish for him and a lesser workload because you want to win in the playoffs, and he's a 28-year-old running back. I rest my case.
And we know who's up next.
Those are actually some valid points, to be honest. Not going to lie. But all I got to say is, have you watched Christian McCaffrey
I'm shocked. that just came out of his mouth.
Yeah. Have you seen McCaffrey play?
He's a freak athlete. There's
birds being flipped.
And I mean, and that just him being a freak athlete and being in a Kyle Shanahan offense. I mean, yeah, maybe his workload could drop a little bit. They also brought in Gurindo, and then Jordan Mason is even a little bit. He could get a little work too. So maybe there is a little bit of drop of McCaffrey, but he's a freak of nature. He's going to make those big plays. He's going to get high amount of catches, which receptions are king in fantasy football for running backs. I mean, even if his catches or if his rushing attempts drops back by an average of say 6 or 7 a game, his receptions are still going to produce a high amount of numbers. And maybe he might not have as great of a season as last year, but I still think he's a guaranteed top 3 running back. He should be number 1 again if he stays healthy. I mean, just the Niners are one of the highest powered offenses in the league. There's so many games last year where they put up a lot of points, but gives McCaffrey a lot of touchdown opportunities. That also does help a lot too. Big thing is last year over 50% of championship teams had Christian McCaffrey. That alone should just be all right, why wouldn't I draft McCaffrey?
Yeah, I mean, so that's one of the biggest things for me is we talked about the injured years, but in his non-injured years, the last 4 of them that he had a fully healthy season, RB3, RB1, RB2, RB1, the guy just produces if he's healthy. So I do get what you're saying, Lee, and I do think that you bring up valid points that have even been backed up with news articles. Most recent thing on Christian McCaffrey, 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan said we have to protect Christian McCaffrey from himself when asked about possibility of reducing his workload. Sounds like they want to reduce his workload a little bit. They do have some talented running backs. Elijah Mitchell, when he's healthy, speed demon. He's great. Isaac Gurindo, I don't think he's as great of a running back as Elijah Mitchell is right now. Also a speed demon, though. Jordan Mason, really solid running back. That's 4 running backs on top of Kyle Juszczyk that they have just to mess around with. But to Mason's point, 165.4 points in PPR off of his receiving game alone. 165.4 points. Let me double check this really quick and see where that would have put him last year.
I just want to jump in real quick. Yeah. I mean, Elijah Mitchell's not a receiving back by any means.
Oh, not at all. Yeah.
So, McCaffrey is going to get the receptions.
100%. Yeah, I wasn't even saying that. I just think that there's other talented running backs on the team that will take away work. Elijah Mitchell's talented. He's been explosive on the ground. But quickly, McCaffrey's 165.4 points off of receiving alone in PPR would have been good for RB33 last year. No rushing numbers involved at all. That's insane. No running backs really do that for your squad. So solid floor. I like both arguments. Evan, take it away.
I am just shocked, and I can't tell if I'm more shocked about the fact that you're trying to talk about his age and potential downfall of performance or anything like that, hindering it that towards that direction even is kind of like kind of shocking. But I think the most shocking thing was Mason's reaction. Am I the only one that thought that there was going to be a crazier reaction?
Oh, I thought it was about to go down. I thought it was like
that you speak that curse into existence about his star player. And this is the reaction that he gets. Wow. Okay. So I
mean, Lee made some valid points. I gotta give his credit where it's due.
But I'm not happy you speaking that curse into existence though, because now every single one of my 101 picks now that I get this year, and I never get them. So of course I'm going to get them this year. This into existence. Yeah. That's
hoping for it, buddy. Hoping for it.
Yes, I expect McCaffrey to do great. Curse aside.
So, one other thing just to add that I had on my sheet, I had a lot of data here. Christian McCaffrey had 3 games last year, 3, where he played 100% of snaps. He had 6 more games where he played at least 85% of snaps. They got to get his excuse me, we're still on the radio. They have to get him off the field. They have to if they try to give him that sort of snap count, again, he is going to get hurt at 28 years old. But beyond the snap count, beyond the projecting injury, that's unheard of. And to play 1 game as a wide receiver, a running back at 100% snaps is insane. Yeah. To have 3 and then 6 more over 85, they're asking too much of him. He played pretty well in the playoffs. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think the long-term goal is obviously the Super Bowl for every team, and the best way to get there is to save some of that juice.
I want to add on Evan talking about curses and stuff. It made me think McCaffrey is also on the cover of Madden, which is a little scary.
Oh, no, double cursed.
What are you doing?
Double cursed.
Jason, are you looking for your own?
Lee, I'm on your side now. He's a bust.
I think you found your self-destruct button. I think you found.
Yeah. Hey, I just got to be real. No bias here, except that Brock Purdy.
I think fantasy football players are a superstitious bunch. Not even a little stitious. So you found the button for all of us there. Double curse. Let's move on to the next guy here before we run out of some time. I got David Montgomery as my bust pick. I think David Montgomery is a solid floor player, and if you really just need a running back that you can kind of rely on for 10 to 12 points and half PPR, that's your guy. But right now he's going off the board as the RB19. Last year he finished as the RB13. He had 13 touchdowns last season, with 10 of them coming inside of the 10-yard line. Jahmyr Gibbs. So from week 10 on, the Lions had their bye in week 9. Montgomery owned the goal line work up until that point, but after their bye, Montgomery had 15 attempts inside of the 10-yard line, and so did Gibbs. Montgomery had 6 touchdowns off of those touches. Gibbs had 5. They clearly started to trust Gibbs with the goal line work a little bit more, and he was just as efficient as Montgomery was. He had 27 yards compared to Monty's 24. It's inside the 10. It's tough yards to get. But 5 and 6 touchdowns, very comparable there. Whereas Montgomery had just 16 receptions last year. He did miss a few games, so, averaged just over a reception per game. But Gibbs, I don't have it in front of me right now, but I'm pretty sure he was in the 60s for receptions and I believe the 90s for targets. I was a little off. 71 targets, 52 receptions, still about 4 times as much as Montgomery was getting last season. So overall, just Montgomery's efficiency inside the red zone, I can see it repeating to a degree, but it's going to be the efficiency with less volume. If he doesn't have the volume inside of the red zone, if Gibbs truly does step into this RB1 role and takes over as the 1A, Montgomery is not going to be fun to own week to week. That's the thing. I think that Montgomery can still live up to his RB19 ADP right now. I think he could finish the season as RB19, probably that mid-tier RB2 range. But week to week, unless he scores 2 touchdowns, there's no upside. He needs Gibbs to get injured for there to be upside. And I'm not trying to draft a running back that's going at the 605 right now that has very limited upside. I think there's guys that you can get in that area that have so much more upside with a similar floor. So I am staying away from Montgomery this season. That being said, like I said, depending on your construction, maybe you can go and grab Montgomery as like that sturdy floor player for you. What say you, boys?
Interesting. The you do have him. I know you have a share of him. So way to
I do have Monty in one dynasty
place a
league,
bust
yeah.
on a player you own. Okay.
I traded for him with you.
Yes.
2 hours before
like
the
you're looking to trade
NFL
him
draft.
away.
I was like, DeAndre Swift's not a great running back.
Yeah.
I think that Monty takes over this role. And they're like, psych, we're drafting Gibbs in the first round. And then I thought they were going to have Gibbs, Swift, and Monty. And I was like, I'm going to shoot myself.
Speaking of the draft, though, like we have, you asked, you were surprised that I took Gibbs over Breece Hall in our dynasty startup too. I actually do believe
I stand by. There's no Monty on the Jets.
I do believe that
I love
this is
Braylon
the
Allen.
season where Gibbs takes over as the one, and I think he gets a lot of work in even when Montgomery's on the field too.
Right. I just think that for that specific thing you brought up, I think Breece is one of 3, maybe 4 bell cow running backs in the NFL. Obviously CMC, Bijan, Breece, and then I would throw Etienne in the mix because Tank Bigsby did nothing to prove himself last year.
They also have the deepest running back now.
What were you saying, Mason?
Saquon's probably also going to be in there this year.
I do think he's bell cow. It's just almost like Jalen Hurts takes away from that with the red zone usage.
If the tush push continues, for sure.
Yeah.
I think this may be the craziest, the biggest thing I've ever agreed with Evan on. Because I'm in the Gibbs camp. I love Breece Hall. I think Gibbs is a better running back. I think if you look at them on the field, to me, and I know I've heard a lot of people say the only 2 running backs that could be RB1 other than Christian McCaffrey are Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson. I like Jahmyr Gibbs more than Bijan Robinson. To me, when I saw him on the field last year, especially later in the year and in those playoff games, the eye test told me that Jahmyr Gibbs will be the best running back in football within 2 years.
Okay.
So, with that being said, I love Jahmyr Gibbs. I own some of them, and so I'm trying not to be biased there. But to me, he is electric with the ball. His pass catching ability, he is on a much better offense than Breece Hall is right now today.
Sure.
Maybe Aaron Rodgers resurrects his career. Maybe he goes and rides a camel in Egypt 3 weeks in, and we're playing with Tyrod Taylor. Who the hell knows? Bijan, we'll see. It should be a better offense. I like the weapons. I'm all in on Atlanta's offense as a whole, but they're still not the Lions' offense. The Lions are a run-first offense. They have a really good offensive line. I know they lost a piece. I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but Panay Sewell is still there. He got paid a huge bag of money. I've seen that offense is a run-first offense. They cater around Jared Goff's strengths, which is running the ball first. I think Monty is probably still a value with where he's at. If something happens and he gets completely phased out or he were to get hurt, Jahmyr Gibbs is RB1 for me. But we can't assume injury. At 20, I've got him at 23 for PPR, which is because he doesn't catch the ball. But the guys he's around, I see Zamir White going a little in front of him in PPR. Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, and Jonathan Brooks are the 2 behind.
Other than Najee, everyone has a more secure RB1 role. Like Montgomery had 219 attempts last year. Even if Jahmyr Gibbs had 189, 182 rushing attempts. So even if that flip flops, when Gibbs becomes the RB 1A, that's still 219, but he's giving up so much work to Monty still. And that's with them flipping. I just don't see that happening with Tyler Algier, Braylon Allen, Who are a couple of guys you mentioned that were in that tier? Even when Jonathan Brooks becomes fully healthy, I don't think that. Oh, thank you guys. That is going to do it for the Atlanta broadcast. Please chime into the YouTube, man. Come talk with us. Comment. We are going to be talking for the rest of maybe not the rest of the night, but we're going to keep on hitting some of these bust players until we get through the rest of them. Thank you guys for joining. We appreciate y'all out there. Let's pick back up where we were leaving off. Some of the players that you were saying that were going off in the same range as him. Zamir White, I don't think Alexander Madison gets as many touches as Monty. I don't think that when Jonathan Brooks is fully healthy that he gives up as many touches to Chuba Hubbard. And who else do you say? Najee and Jalen Warren. That's the one where it's like, for sure, I do believe that could be a split backfield. And they even talked about they didn't extend Najee because they wanted to kind of see where the hot hand took them and then maybe offer the contract if they see it worthy, which is what I wish we would have done with Jerry Jeudy. But I'll move on from that point. What are you going to say, Lee?
I hear you as far as, I mean, you're follow the volume. Volume matters, but talent matters as well. And
Sure.
outside of Jonathan Brooks, because Dynasty, obviously, he's a much higher value person than anybody we mentioned. But year one, late ACL tear, we'll see. But the other guys we've talked about, I think David Montgomery has shown he is clearly a more talented running back than Ramondre Stevenson, than anything Zamir White showed, than Najee Harris, because Najee's been a bit of a plotter. I think that he could see a drastically reduced volume workload, but the carries he gets, if he is still that guy inside the 10, one, it's going to, completely submarine my hopes for Jahmyr Gibbs. But if he's that guy inside the 10, this offense is good enough. Their defense is bad enough he's going to get enough carries inside the 10 that he will be incredibly efficient. It's very possible that David Montgomery.
Do you think Monty will, though? Because, like, you just talked about how much you love Gibbs and how much you believe in him. And we just talked about how they had the same amount of attempts, even in his rookie season from week 10 to 18, which is basically half the season.
I don't know.
Right?
I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, I could be convinced either way there. But Montgomery looked good last year. And he could be Jamal Williams. There's no doubt. He could be a Jamal Williams who benefited from the offense, the carries, and falls off a cliff next year. But at least he is in the same offense. I do think just the size and stature of Gibbs and the money that they're paying Montgomery, I really think it's 2025 before we see the true breakout RB1 season from Jahmyr Gibbs.
Right. No, I do agree with that. I don't think that, like, Monty's disappearing, but I just think they flip. I think the receiving work stays relatively the same, and that the rushing attempts flips in Gibbs' favor about 60-40.
And when I say RB1 for 25, I'm not talking about a top 12 RB.
Right. You're saying
RB1.
Yeah, the RB1. I do believe he has the talent to get there with the possibility. I do think Bijan is the better. I think he's still the more talented running back. Let's see what y'all have to say, though. Mason, take it away.
So my big thing that I want to say is, Gibbs probably will, increase. There's a lot of reports his workload probably will increase. But Montgomery's going to get a lot of touchdowns. And, you could be like, oh, it's just a one-year fluke, backup running back who managed to get a lot of touchdowns. If we look at it 2 years ago under the same head coach, there was DeAndre Swift, who was the RB1, and then Jamal Williams. And Jamal Williams finished as RB7 in 2022, being the backup running back. Because of the way that Dan Campbell runs his offense, there's going to be a lot of goal line touches for Montgomery. I mean, Gibbs will finish as a higher running back, or at least should, but just that offense is so high-powered. And, I mean, Williams really is the better red zone running back. I believe Montgomery got like 16 touchdowns last year, and then the year before, 13?
The year before?
Last
year he got 13 touchdowns.
Yeah, okay, then I believe it was like Jamal Williams the year before got like 16 or something around that range. They don't necessarily exactly have it up in front of me, but I know the touchdown numbers were
There's
insane.
a lot.
But
And-
DeAndre Swift wasn't operating inside of the red zone. That year he had 19 attempts inside of the 20-yard line. Whereas last year Gibbs in weeks 10 to 18 had 15 attempts inside of the 10-yard line. So, we're cutting down the area, and he still had similar numbers in half of the time, half the games played.
Yeah, but I still see Montgomery being, the red zone back. I mean, within the 10 more, not necessarily from the 20. Gibbs might get more opportunities there, or at least he should.
Yeah, no, again, this was from the 10. Gibbs had just as many as Monty from weeks 10 to 18. So they're already opting to go towards Gibbs inside of the 10-yard line.
I just think the touchdown opportunity is still just right there for Montgomery. My mind is on Jamal Williams right now, thinking about that season. That season was so nice.
It was crazy, yeah. All right, Evan.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of said my piece about it too. I think he's very well a bust, but he's gonna have a solid floor to be able to be usable so there is a strategy for him, but I would not depend on him on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like fantasy. Right now, we're thinking of it as a full year, but when it's going on, it's a week-to-week game, and Montgomery isn't going to have that upside unless he scores 2 touchdowns because he has 0 passing yards. So I will move on to the next one here. We got Mason coming up. Who you got here for your bust pick?
I'm gonna say Najee Harris. The one thing that maybe strikes out to me is I think Warren is going to get a lot more usage this year. Najee was this is last year. Steelers refused to extend him. I think that just shows the lack of confidence in Najee, number one. 2, Arthur Smith is the offensive coordinator there, and I do not want Pickens is probably the only one on that offense that I want because I think he's the only one who's going to be consistent. I think everyone else is going to give you a week-to-week heart attack. You're going to be wondering why Najee has 4 touches towards the end of the second quarter. That's just how it's going to be some weeks. I think it's going to be really, he's going to be so inconsistent to draft him there. And like people like Mostert is going after him who, his inconsistency could be there as well. But, I mean, he just came off an amazing season. Zamir White, Tony Pollard are going after him. I'd much rather take any of those guys instead of Najee. I still don't see Steelers being necessarily this high-powered offense. Justin Fields right now is taking first-team reps, which, if he's the quarterback, they're going to design run plays for him too, which is going to take some away from both Warren and Najee. I think that Warren's going to be the more designed big down the field, passing plays. I think that just fits him a lot better than Najee does. I'm not confident in him at all. Not really confident in the Steelers' offense. I just think there's a lot of factors for a guy who, the past 2 seasons has just played below expectations, and I continue to see that happening. And just year after year, we're like, oh, he's going to come back to what he did in his rookie season. He's got a chance of doing it. I don't see a world where that happens, and I'd rather take that late. I think he could finish late 20s and RBs. That could easily happen, but I think I'd rather take a risk. Go later, take Mostert or Zamir White. Like quite honestly, just because they have potential to finish so much higher than him.
Completely agree with you, and even I would take Warren over Najee as well. He looks so much more explosive. He's more involved in the passing game. Like you said, they did not extend Najee or Jalen. They had the opportunity to do both in contract years, but they're going to let it play out, see who's they think is the better running back in this new system ran by Arthur Smith. And I do think that could be Jalen Warren, who is going a round later than Najee is across all leagues. And in Sleeper, Najee's the 703, where Jalen Warren is the 901. I'll take Jalen Warren there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I mean, but then again, at the same time, he's already pretty low. I think his ADP has already dropped him enough where he'd be a decent play. But he's at that bottom of like the last tier of running back that I would want to have to depend on, like Zamir White, Pollard. Even I don't like Mostert. Brooks is kind of dependable, but after that, it gets pretty ugly for me. So I think that it's for desperation play, I would see myself falling into that, but definitely not going to be happy about it.
I'm gonna take the other stance. I don't want to be the echo. With the three of us. So I don't know how much higher his ceiling is than where he's being drafted. Like I said, I think I'm on PPR scoring, and he's down at 24.
You're saying his ADP or his last year finish?
His ADP, according to fantasy.
Yeah, I got him as RB23 right now.
Yeah, so half PPR he's 23, full PPR he's 24. He has had, admittedly, a disappointing start to his career, mostly because of where he was drafted and the expectation that he was going to be an RB1. In a lot of instances, a top half of that RB1. But if you look at what he's produced over the 3 years, in half PPR, he was RB20 last year, his worst season, which he was still 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, and he still had 29 catches. So he wasn't non-existent in the passing game. Obviously not what Jalen Warren adds, but not terrible, especially for a bigger back. He was half PPR RB14 the year before that, and then he was RB4 in half PPR his rookie season.
That's the thing. Just really quick, the rookie season with Ben Roethlisberger gets the 74 receptions. I think that's what set this unrealistic expectation for Najee. It was such a broken system where Ben was just looking for, Antonio Brown when he was healthy, and I think that was a very, very short amount of time in that season. And then checking down. That was it.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you there, but I mean, even let's remove obviously that's an outlier. He's not going to catch 74 balls. But although if it's Russell Wilson, he likes to check down. He does not like throwing interceptions at this point of his career. But if you look at just the rushing stats, over 3 years, he's had 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns, 1,000 yards, 1,038, 7 touchdowns, 1,035, 8 touchdowns. If you could tell me with certainty that my running back that I draft as RB23, and overall we're looking at 64 overall, so somewhere in that early to late 6th round. If you could guarantee me that guy's going to get 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, I'm taking that. And what scares me a little bit more than Jalen Warren, because he has a different role, Arthur Smith scares me. Cordell Patterson is probably going to get some unreasonable goal line carries out of nowhere that make no sense. But I think Najee, because of his expectations, gets a little bit of a bad rap. I love having a guy in a contract year. There's never going to be a season in his NFL career that he tries harder than this season, right here. He wants a second contract. He wants to stay in the league. He wants to be a starter somewhere. The offense is going to be better. How much better, we shall see. However, George Pickens is really the only proven is a little bit of a stretch with George Pickens, but he's the only guy that's a real receiving threat. Najee is the 1A. Is he the first option on this offense? I mean, I think there's an argument to be made for it. So just where he's going, I think there's some value there, and I think he gives you a solid floor.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and just really quick, so yes, he's gotten over 1,000 yards rushing each of his 3 years in the league. He's also had at least 7 touchdowns in each of those 3 years. He's never topped 4.1 yards per attempt. In Jalen Warren's 2 years in the NFL, 4.9 and 5.2. I don't think he gets those types of efficiency metrics if he is operating as the RB1 or running in those short yardage situations like Najee is. But we all kind of talked about it. The passing game is not what it used to be, even though the quarterback room has improved overall. Right now, it's George Pickens and nobody else. And people have mixed opinions about Deontay Johnson, but he is very efficient at getting open in the short to intermediate range. That's not going to do you great for fantasy unless it's a full PPR league, but that is going to move the chains and get Najee into the red zone more frequently. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I think this is the first year Najee has under 7 rushing touchdowns. In his first 2 years, he had 3 receiving touchdowns in each of those years. So 10 total touchdowns in his first 2 seasons. That kind of puts him into that, back end RB2 or front end RB2, back end RB1 conversation. I don't think that's in the realm of possibility this year. I think at best, unless Jalen Warren gets injured, I don't think that there's a chance that Najee Harris finishes inside of the RB15 range. Evan, you haven't got a chance to chime in yet.
Najee. I mean, he's not a terrible choice at his ADP, but I still don't know. I think I'd rather go the Warren side, and I think I talked about his like tier. He's the bottom of the tier for me. Like that's his bottom tier. So yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of how I feel about him.
All right. Well, then let's kick it to you, Evan. You also got a very interesting bust pick. I'm happy that we can end on this one. Take it away.
Yeah. So I mean, this is going to be about Trey McBride, and I'm not going to deny the talent. I think that that's pretty clear and obvious that he does have that. He's probably going to produce top 10 tight end numbers this year. So to put him in this bust category, it's also just has to be because of his ADP. Currently he's got 46, and he's going ahead of Andrews and Kincaid, as well as like breakout players like you just talked about, having the like George Pickens, the only player you want on the Steelers. So I think that his current ADP was set at his end of season pace, and I think that end of season pace was dependent on injuries to Michael Wilson. Yes, he's still there. He's a relevant name. I know I had to bring up his name just because I love seeing your guys' head shake. But
McBride's not losing targets to Michael Wilson. Let's just be clear really quick.
Let's be clear. Michael Wilson is going to get targets, and also Marvin Harrison Jr. is there. Obviously, that's the main thing that's changed this offense, and the main reason why I don't think that he's going to be able to meet where he's at and where he was producing like last year. I don't think he's going to be able to maintain that. So, drafting at this ADP, I think that there's a lot of better options later on. And I've seen a lot of us pass on him too in the fantasy. Like, none of us drafted him. I think all of us are looking for the tier of the Kincaid Andrews.
That's just the best value. I hear you, but McBride's not far off for me. I think Kyler Murray is a guy that can absolutely support 2 passing options, and those passing options are Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride. After that,
who outperforms? Who performs better, Kincaid or Trey McBride this year?
Remove draft status. Just in a vacuum. Who has more fantasy points?
Yeah.
Are you saying who has the higher? You said higher ceiling this year.
More fantasy. Who has more fantasy points this year?
Between
honestly all 3 of them. I think Kincaid's at the bottom of the list. If we're talking about Andrews, Kincaid, or I think
he's the last of the tier. He's the last of the tier. I honestly will throw Kyle Pitts in there, but there's just not enough proven for that to be a thing.
He's not getting drafted at the last of the tier. He's getting drafted above the guys. So I don't. Yeah, that's from what I was seeing.
No. Like I hear what you're saying. Trey McBride right now in Sleeper, he is the 410 overall. So back of the 4th is a little bit spicy. Dalton Kincaid right now in Sleeper is the 503. It's not that far removed at all from where McBride is going.
Where's Andrews?
I think I personally do have Kincaid listed as the top target earner in Buffalo, regardless of position.
Yeah.
I don't know how reliable that is. I would love for Kincaid to be the top earner in terms of targets, but I don't know how much they are going to mix it up between him and Knox. Both are athletic tight ends. They have a highly invested Keon Coleman. They got Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel. It's a very ambiguous room, whereas the Cardinals are not ambiguous. There are two options in the receiving game, and then James Conner as a check down. It's very set, and that's what I want to see when I'm drafting a tight end is a team that is there's no questions. It's going to be my guy as one of the top two options on that team. So that's why I like McBride. I also do think that despite the Bills losing a lot on defense, and it could go south, I still think the Cardinals' defense is worse. I think they're going to be stuck in more passing situations, and I do think that Kyler Murray, just in terms of pure passing numbers, about as accurate as Josh Allen is, maybe doesn't have the same volume as Josh Allen does, but also doesn't just take off and run in these situations where he's playing hero ball. So that's where I stand. I will go McBride over Kincaid.
Yeah,
Ooh, wow. Okay.
I would say McBride over Kincaid as well. I mean, to draft a tight end this early, and he's going middle fourth around there, sometimes a little earlier. I think when you're drafting a tight end that early, you need to be for sure about it because there's a lot of skipping one of the other positions to draft a tight end. I mean, like right there, you can get going around him is like Rashad White, who should be RB1 there all year. DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith, James Cook, Joe Mixon. Those are all guys going in the fourth. And I think that Kincaid's going around there too. There's a lot of worry with Kincaid. McBride is. There's no way that he finishes outside of top 6 or 7 tight ends. There's no possibility.
I disagree. See, honestly, Evan Ingram scares me there. George Kittle scares me there, especially if Ayuk moves. Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, but I don't see. I feel like he's one of the few tight ends that I am fully confident in that they're going to get a lot of work all season. I mean, you're a big Michael Wilson guy, which maybe he does feed into it a little bit. Marvin Harrison Jr., he should be a big target. He's still a rookie. It takes some time to really adjust to the NFL level. McBride is the only guy on the team that is truly proven. And I mean, it was only the end of last season and all, but still, he's the only one on that team who's really proven himself. And I think he's worth that pick around there because you get a guaranteed that you're going to start all season long. I mean, obviously, his bye week, you pick someone else up. But McBride you won't have to worry about the tight end position all year. I mean, Kincaid, Andrews, there's some uncertainty there because, I mean, he's a stud, absolute beast, but likely could start working in a little more. And I think besides Laporta, Kelsey's probably going to take a little teardrop back because they're, trying to keep him healthy for the playoffs again like they did last year. But I mean, Laporta Kelsey are probably the only 2 tight ends I would take in front of Trey McBride, to be honest. I might be missing one that I just can't think of. But I think just McBride is one of the few tight ends that I'm confident in all year long that he's going to put up consistent numbers week to week. Kittle will be better at some weeks. There's no doubt about that. But McBride will consistently throw up numbers.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to take a different tack here. I'm not going to answer the Kincaid and the Mark Andrews question. You mentioned a name right then, who is the consensus #1 tight end, Sam Laporta. We love him. Fantasy loves him. He was the #1 tight end for 17 games last year in a good Detroit offense. He had 10 touchdowns. Obviously, an outlier for a tight end. That's what really buoyed him to be tight end 1. He had 86 receptions on 120 targets and 889 yards. Trey McBride did not take over as the consensus tight end 1 until after 7 games in the season last year. He finished
even further than that, just because I see what you're saying there, and I was literally crunching the numbers right there. Did not top 52% snaps until week 6. After that, it was between 58 and 69 for the most part. Then from there on, he did not have less than 72% of snaps, going up to 100% of snaps and
From week
averaging in
8
the
on,
80s.
after the
Yeah.
first 7. So,
Yep.
again, after that first 7, there were a couple of outlier weeks, but really week 8 on, 10 games where he was the guy. For the season, he finished with 81 receptions on 106 targets and 825 yards. If we look at those numbers, because those numbers are the most repeatable, that's pretty damn close to what our tight end won. A guy drafted right now a full 25 spots in front of Trey McBride produced. Now, Trey McBride only had 3 touchdowns. So 3 versus 10, I think none of us may be great at math. 10's obviously better than 3. However, touchdowns are the most unpredictable stat. I believe that Marvin Harrison Jr. will increase Trey McBride's opportunity for touchdowns because they will be in a much more efficient offense. So if you extrapolate the numbers that Trey McBride had over just 10 games, they're going to go down a little bit in target share, obviously. We've got a true number 1. Amon-Ra St. Brown is in Detroit. I think there's an argument to be made that Trey McBride, especially 25 picks later, is a much better value than Sam Laporta for the 2024 season.
Completely agreed. Lee, to your point, from week 8 on, McBride outscored Laporta, albeit in PPR, it was just by 0.9 points. So not by much, but he still outscored him even from that point on. And he wasn't even at like the full snap percentage. From week 7, 53%, in week 9, 69% of snaps. He wasn't even like to that point where he was like, I am taking over Zach Ertz, out of here. So I do think that McBride has that opportunity. I think that he's a little bit better of a value. And I think that Laporta being the tight end 1, although, I get it. He's athletic. He was my favorite tight end coming out of last year's class. But 10 touchdowns in a rookie season is insane for a tight end. And then even from that stretch that we're talking about, from week 8 on, Laporta had 7 touchdowns where McBride had the 3. It's like those are the least stickiest stat in the world. And if you remove Laporta's touchdowns, he's no longer the tight end 1 on the season. So the 7 touchdowns compared to the 3 in that time. So we'll see where it goes. I like McBride a lot. Evan, we got to give yourself a chance to defend it after we rebutted, though.
I want to just jump in before Evan rebuttals and give one little more point. McBride, started off the season very slow, but that was with Zach Ertz there as well. They were playing for a lot of competition. And Clayton Tune and Josh Dobbs were the quarterbacks. Tune did play last year, right? But, there's bad quarterback play. Since Kyler Murray came back, McBride absolutely excelled. I mean, he had 2 bad weeks, that's it. But every other week, he had a top 12 finish in tight ends. And I see people are drafting, and someone said that, they're drafting him off what he did at the end of the season. Well, yeah, he did a lot better because Kyler Murray was his quarterback. And I don't see him getting any worse. I see only improvement. I don't see how he could get any worse.
That's the best point you've ever made on this show, Mason. I'm 100%.
On that, we're going to end it here. Love you two getting along. Look at that. Mason agreeing with anti-CMC takes from Lee. Lee agreeing with McBride takes from Mason, interdivisional. Rhea will be back next week. We're going to come back with plenty of action-packed episodes between now and the start of the season. Make sure you stay tuned. And we got some consensus rankings. Me and Tyler, we combine our projections. We will have that out by next week, so make sure you stay tuned. Maybe we'll have a little bit of a rankings disparity episode. It's been long enough. With that, take it easy, you guys. Have a great week.